Good evening. I'd like to call the February 16, 2021 meeting of the University Heights City Council to order. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Here.
Mrs. Berry,
Here.
Mrs. Pardee,
Here.
Mrs. Weiss,
Here.
Mr. Ertl, Mr. Rock,
Here.
Mr. Gould.
Here.
Okay, seeing that everyone is here, will all those who are able please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes. We have a set of council minutes from the February 1, 2021 meeting. Is there a motion?
So move, Mayor.
We have a motion to adopt the minutes of the February 1, 2021 meeting by Mrs. Pardee. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss, Mr. Ertl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. The minutes are approved. Our next item on the agenda is comments from the audience. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes, a total time allowed of 15 minutes per meeting unless otherwise permitted by Council Ordinance number 91-25. Is there anybody here this evening who would care to address the city?
Yes, I would, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. I see Stephen Wertheim. Mr. Wertheim, if you would state your name and address for the record, you may have up to 5 minutes to address the city. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Stephen Wertheim. I live at 4355 Baintree, a street that's been plowed beautifully today. Thank you. I'm here. Good evening, City Council members and Mayor Brennan. As I said, my name's Steve Wertheim, and I'm here tonight as a member of the Reaching Heights Board, a local nonprofit that shares information, coordinates programs, and sponsors events that connect the community to the Heights Public Schools. At a recent Board of Education meeting, the school district presented a hybrid model for reopening the Heights schools. These are the plans that were shared. All staff were called back into the buildings as of Friday, February 5th. Last week, some students began attending in person and others attended building orientations. Today, all students were welcomed back in the buildings on the following schedule. Elementary students will attend 4 half-days, either in the morning or the afternoon. Middle and high school students will attend in person 2 days per week and remotely 2 days per week. Wednesday will be remote learning for all students. These models have been carefully crafted. Excuse me, my battery is dying. Let me put a cord in. I just saw that happen. I apologize.
Understood.
Okay, there you go. These models have been carefully crafted with input from educators, administrators, parents, the reopening committee members, with the best outcomes for the students in mind. Students and their families have the option to remain fully remote, excuse me, or sign up for the Ohio online program, a fully remote, self-paced option. Careful planning has been done for procedures for cleaning surfaces, keeping social distance, maintaining safe airflow, access to PPE, and managing new cases of COVID that arrives. Also, tomorrow, all teachers will be able to be vaccinated at the Educational Service Center in Independence, Ohio. Details constantly change about this plan. And if you're interested in more information or up-to-date information, you can always visit the website at chuh.org. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Wertheim. We appreciate the update. Is there anybody else who would care to address the city this evening? Okay. I do have, I've been provided with 3 letters from members of the community that ask that their letters be read during the public comment section of the meeting. So I will go ahead with those letters at this juncture. The first is from Jody Serini of 2260 Fenwick Road. Mayor Brennan, Vice Mayor Weiss, and members of the University Heights City Council. I wish I could be there in person to address our City Council tonight. Unfortunately, I am unable because my presence is required at our school board meeting this evening. I'm reaching out to you tonight as both a school board member and as a resident of University Heights who is interested in the long-term viability of our community. I want to express my support for the project to develop townhomes in the Taylor Road corridor. The housing market in University Heights is attractive right now. That is a good thing. The Taylor Road townhome project would give us the unique opportunity to attract home buyers who desire new construction close to downtown and University Circle. It's my hope that these home buyers will move here and, like me 27 years ago, fall in love with all that our community has to offer. I want more people to put down roots here as well as support our local businesses. If they outgrow their townhome, I want them to purchase a larger home in the Heights and send their children to Cleveland Heights University Heights City Schools. But they may not move here in the first place if this project does not come to fruition. This townhome project is unique with much vision. That's why the school board voted to transfer 4 parcels of land at the Delisle Center to the city of University Heights. The 4 parcels the school district owned at the Delisle Center were not usable to the district for educational purposes. This meant, in addition to being responsible for the upkeep, the district was required to pay taxes on them. The city of University Heights owned an additional 3 parcels. Because of the shape and location of the parcels and the fact that they were owned by 2 separate entities, they were unlikely to be usable or to be developed unless they were combined. Ohio Revised Code has very specific rules regarding the disposition of public school properties which are considered public assets. The school board must follow the law, even though the law may not enable a public school district to maximize potential revenue the way a city can. Due to the community reinvestment area, the buildings themselves will be tax abated for 15 years, which the school district has no authority to contest or approve. Yet, if the land were developed, even under a CRA, in the first 15 years, the school district will receive modest tax revenue from the developer based on the parcel divisions and the initial improvements required to develop the land. After 15 years, the district will receive taxes on both the land as well as the buildings, which should increase significantly based on the project's value in 15 years. A new development, as is planned for this property, typically increases the value of its surrounding neighborhood and often spurs additional economic growth. Revitalizing the Taylor corridor would bring positive benefits to both the cities of University Heights and Cleveland Heights, as well as the school district. The legal agreement with the school board includes a clawback provision. This ensures that if the development does not proceed as planned, the land reverts back to the school district. What a lost opportunity it will be for both the cities of University Heights and Cleveland Heights, as well as our school district, if that happens, because the development does not come to fruition. I encourage you to move forward with the Taylor Road Townhome Project. Respectfully submitted, Jody Serini, board member, Cleveland Heights, University Heights City Schools. Letter number 2 is from Future Heights. Future Heights is located at 2843 Washington Boulevard, Suite 105 in Cleveland Heights. Dear University Heights City Council members, Future Heights, a nonprofit community development corporation serving both Cleveland Heights and University Heights, was excited to learn about the University Heights Planning Commission's approval of the South Taylor Place site plan and encourages your approval of the project. Our Planning and Development Committee reviewed the project at its February meeting. Located in the northern portion of the Cedar-Taylor Business District, which straddles University Heights and Cleveland Heights, we believe the project will benefit both cities. Construction of high-quality townhomes on vacant, underutilized land will add appropriate density and be a good transition between the commercial uses of the district and the nearby single-family homes. The addition of 30 new households to the community will augment the local tax base, increase the vibrancy of the district, and spur additional revitalization along the corridor. We believe that parking for the proposed project is adequate and that solutions for guest parking, such as a shared use agreement with owners of adjacent parking lots or on-street parking permits, would meet the needs of residents. Congratulations on moving forward with this dynamic project. Sincerely, Deanna Bremer Fisher, Executive Director, Robert N. Brown, Co-Chair of the Planning and Development Committee, and Jennifer Wintner, also Co-Chair of the Planning and Development Committee. I would note that Robert Brown, besides being the co-chair of this committee, also was the Director of Planning for the City of Cleveland for over 10 years. Third and final letter comes from Michael Hancock of 3910 Bushnell Road. Dear Mayor and members of council, Mary Elizabeth and I live on Bushnell Road along with our 2 dogs and a baby due on June 13th. We are relatively new to the neighborhood, having moved here at the end of 2017. A few of you have visited our company, Odd Dog Coffee, University Heights independent coffee shop on wheels. Through our coffee shop, we've had the privilege to serve and befriend hundreds of local residents. In the process, we've grown to become absolutely smitten with our fair city, a diverse, densely populated urban suburban neighborhood of absolutely wonderful residents. It is also because of our coffee shop on wheels that we have a unique perspective on development projects that impact the city. You may not know this, but we have been actively seeking a permanent location for our coffee shop for the last 12 months. In the summer, we began modeling out specific locations with preliminary build-out plans, initial funding requirements, and a 5-year financial model, taking into consideration density, traffic patterns, all modeled to produce a forecast of cups of coffee served. Unfortunately, the unknowns of COVID-19 broke our model and caused us to reconsider the investment required to build out and staff a full-blown traditional coffee shop. I can't rely on street traffic as my main driver of forecasting sales. I have to rely on local households at a smaller radius and literal neighborhood density. Busy streets and commercial districts act as a barrier between neighborhood businesses and our actual neighbors in suburban areas. Luckily, University Heights has the benefit of being a transitional neighborhood with elements of both urban and suburban cities. That is why I believe the plans for Cedar-Taylor to be a very smart step in the right direction. We like to brag about our neighborhood as being walkable, but where are the neighbors walking? I can't imagine trying to walk to Target or walking down Cedar to stop by one of the Cedar-Taylor stores as easily as I can stroll to the Walt. On the other hand, during my 10 years in Ohio City, arguably one of the most urban neighborhoods in Greater Cleveland, I would walk to local businesses on a daily basis. This plan for 30 condos can begin to change to the juxtaposition between neighbors and the businesses on Taylor, bringing residents closer to their businesses and deepening those relationships, just as I've had the pleasure of doing in my cafe in the park at the Walt. Odd Dog Coffee's near-term plans nonetheless include some version of a permanent coffee shop located specifically in University Heights. Doing business in University Heights is profitable, specifically because of the neighborhood density in our small footprint. It's rewarding because of the diversity, the excellent residents, the engagement of our local officials, and the exciting developments taking place in the areas of the neighborhood with much needed attention. We just have to find the right place at the right time. I don't know if Odd Dog Coffee would thrive in the North Cedar-Taylor district. I do know in its current state, I'd rather look elsewhere. What I see is a vacant Melt, a former chicken building, a Family Dollar, and a BMV saturating local favorites like Mr. Brisket and Quintana's. If I were a business located on Taylor, the 30 new condos being proposed are new potential customers. For me, that's the potential of a new business district for Odd Dog to consider investing in, the potential of a staffed coffee shop with local employees, serving neighbors and creating economic activity, created by us, your neighbor on Bushnell. It is for these reasons I write you, urging quick passage tomorrow evening. this evening of the Kenez Home plans as designed. As I shared on our local community Facebook page, if council waits for perfection, be it parking or other, you'll never get it done. Seeing Van Aken and the Up the Hill project at Cedar Hill surrounding us, the time to move on these projects, the ones I've been hearing about since I moved here in 2017, is right now. Thanks, Mike Hancock. Before we move on the agenda, are there any other public comments this evening? All right, seeing none, we will go to reports and communications from the mayor and the taking of action. I will keep this very brief because I know we have lots to discuss and we've already taken a fair amount of time. Due to circumstances beyond anyone's control, the Building and Housing Department will remain closed until Wednesday, February 24th. You may leave a voicemail or an email with the department during this time, and your message will be answered as soon as possible. All personnel in the department are out on quarantine as a result of contact tracing. I can also tell you that ServPro will be doing a deep clean of the building department building and of City Hall tomorrow morning, beginning at 9:30. Also, due to exigent circumstances, the State of the City address scheduled for this Thursday evening is also postponed. A new date will be announced in the upcoming weeks. And that concludes my report. We will now turn to the agenda items. And the first item on the agenda is letter A, recommendation from the Planning Commission for site plan approval from Kenez Homes for the South Taylor Place condominiums on South Taylor Road. We do have representatives of Kenez Builders here this evening. I see Michael David is here. Mr. David, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, members of council, for your time this evening. We're very happy to be here. It was very nice to hear those letters of support from the community. We're very excited about this project. Just by way of a little background, if you're not familiar with Kenez Homes, we are a residential builder and developer. We've been in business in Northeast Ohio for over 30 years. Our main specialty, especially as of the past 10 or so years, has been in urban infill housing. You'll see our products everywhere from Ohio City, Tremont, to the east side in Shaker Heights, Circle North, as well as in your community here in University Heights, where we've put up a few single family homes, and we look forward to putting up more in the future. As the mayor mentioned, we're here today to request council's approval of our site plan for the South Taylor Place townhomes. These are townhomes that, as the mayor's letters indicated, have been a long time coming, even before it seems we got involved, but we've been working on this product in conjunction with the city for about a year now. Also on the call with me is Hannah Cohen. She's our architect. She'll be able to walk through the plan with you. If you have any specific questions or would like to see the whole presentation, we're happy to do that for you. Otherwise, we're happy to answer any questions you may have. Hannah?
Hey everyone, thanks for your time tonight. If it's all right, I'll share my screen to put our presentation up and just walk through the general layout. I'm sorry.
Credentials to do that, Mrs. Thomas? Have you, are you able to do that, Hannah?
I believe so, yes. Thank
Very
you.
good. Please proceed.
So as Mike gave a brief intro of our background as a builder, I can take you through this specific project. This is our South Taylor Place townhomes. It's a 1.2 acre site between Taylor and Wynn Road. It's in the northwest corner, and a small portion of the site does cross over into the Cleveland Heights border. We are just south of the Delisle Education Center. There's a residential area to the southeast of our site, and then a commercial district to the south and the west. So we feel like townhomes are a fitting use here. They're a great bridge between that residential area towards the commercial area. It's a good kind of stepping stone from single family residential to this sort of multifamily density to the commercial area. Our proposal, here's our site location. Here's some photos of the surrounding areas. Our proposal is for 30 townhomes. We'll just zoom in on our site plan a little so it's easier to see. We're proposing 30 townhouse units. It's 8 buildings total, so they're in groups of 3s and 4s. The zoning for this site is the residential attached district. So within that zoning, townhouses are permitted use. With our current site plan, we are not anticipating needing any zoning variances. So we're complying with all the requirements of the residential attached district. The units will be fee simple, meaning the owner owns the land underneath them as well as the building. So it's a little bit different. It's not a condo. It is a fee simple ownership. There will be an HOA for the site that handles maintenance. They will handle landscape, trash removal, snow removal, any kind of maintenance activities that would arise on the site. The units are primarily 2,000 square feet. We do have one larger unit in the southeast corner, unit number 23, that's 2,400 square feet. And we have that sort of special unit there to give more of a buffer to the single family house that's across, that's the neighbor to that property line. All of the units have 2-car attached garages. They're all a mix of 2 and 3 bedrooms. We also have an option to add a bedroom on the first floor, so it could be as many as 4 bedrooms if someone wanted. Our idea for this project was to keep the program of the units very flexible so we can appeal to a large variety of buyers. So people that might want just 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, up to 4. So it could be appropriate for a young working professional or a family with kids even. So we have a good mix in there. The units all have open concept main living areas, modern features and amenities, large windows, and roof decks for private outdoor space. I'll show the renderings in just a few minutes so you can see that, but the units number 1 through 8 that are fronting on Taylor, they have a little bit of a more commercial feel to them because they are in that commercial district, and all of those have roof decks that are looking towards downtown. So we're hoping for some great views on those units. The rest of the units have an option for a roof deck. So it's something that the buyer can choose at the time of construction if they want to add it or not. So again, keeping these as flexible as possible. The style of the buildings is meant to complement the residential character of the area, fit in with it. This was our original elevation on South Taylor. We have revised this through our meeting process with the Planning Commission. So this is the more commercial design that we are asking for approval on, and we have gotten approval from the Planning Commission on. So it has a mix of brick and siding. You can see the flat roofs there. That gives us those roof decks facing Taylor. These are the units that are internal on the site. And they're a mix of siding, and the idea is for them to be high quality, low maintenance materials. So someone who's looking for one of these townhomes isn't required or going to need to do a lot of upkeep on these exteriors. They will be easy to maintain. These are the side elevations, so you can see how the units work with the optional roof deck. So from the front, the unit looks exactly the same, and it's the roof deck that goes on the rear. So you keep the consistent look on the front of the units, but again, it gives the flexibility to the buyers. This is the side of one of the units on Taylor 1 through 8 that have the flat roofs, and you can see the plan here of the roof deck for that. These are our floor plan. This is a typical floor plan, so you can see it's vertical townhome living. The lower level, you have a garage and a flex space. We have the option for the bedroom there. Your second floor is your main living with that big open concept. The third floor, we have options for a 2-bedroom configuration or a 3-bedroom configuration, and again, the optional roof deck. This is a sample of the material palette. So you can see we're proposing 2 different colors of brick that's primarily on the Taylor facing elevations. And then we have a mix of different colors of vinyl lap siding. There's some vertical board and batten siding that's an accent that happens in the gables of the roofs. This is our landscape plan. It's a little hard to read all the species on it, but it's available if anyone has specific questions about it. Our site plan has several shared green spaces. This one to the northwest corner, where we are connecting to the existing walkway there to kind of continue the pathway that's there and create a park. We also have a little pocket park towards the south side of the site. And we've created this pedestrian courtyard down the center of the site with some landscaping features to really focus on the pedestrian experience moving through there. We have some extensive screening where our property does abut a residential property. So we have a thick row of arborvitae there to give a visual screen and some privacy for all the neighbors there. These are our renderings that gives you sort of a better feel for it. This is the original version before we had switched to the flat roof style on South Taylor. So this will be the elevation I showed before with the flat roofs. This is again looking from South Taylor, an aerial view, and you can kind of see some of the units that would have roof decks versus not having roof decks. This is the view from Wynn Road, so it's more residential on this side to fit in with the single family homes there. Again, another view from Wynn Road. This is the central pedestrian courtyard. You can see where the internal units have always front doors facing front doors, again, to focus on the pedestrian experience. This is a view that shows that little pocket park towards the south side of the site and that central pedestrian courtyard. And this is just a view of the path that would connect you, one of the paths that takes you from Taylor to Wynn, and an aerial view of the overall site. I'm going to go back to the site plan and just touch on a couple things with the site plan. So we are proposing to have one curb cut only, so all of the vehicular access is coming from Wynn Road. For a variety of reasons, that's preferable from a security standpoint to prevent the development from being a cut through and to fit with the intent of the zoning code that calls for a clear separation of vehicular and pedestrian circulation. So we spent a lot of time on that. You can see the different pedestrian paths we have. So we have a lot of walkability and connectivity within the site. We've also worked with the different city departments, particularly the fire department, on making sure we have the turning radius and clearances they need to get all of their life safety vehicles into the site. So they have seen this and signed off on it. And we are complying with all the dimensions and requirements that they have requested. I think that's a pretty good overview. I don't know if we want to open it up for questions.
Certainly. Are there any questions for the presenters? Yeah, I don't have.
Here.
Oh, is that Mrs. Pardee?
It is.
Go ahead, Mrs. Pardee.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank Knez for this wonderful work. And I was grateful to get a copy of this plan earlier and spent a lot of time poring over it. So I do love what I'm seeing. It's very exciting. I'm a little concerned about the tightness of everything and the turning radii, as you said. But as much you've answered some of those questions, I am wondering where people who visit people here will park. Because I know, and I drove by there today to double check again, the laundromat and some of those businesses end up with parking all the way along the street. So there's virtually no parking on the street typically because there are people parked on the street. And except for some occasions, that laundromat parking lot is full. I think the other businesses on the street don't have a lot of parking. So what were the plans for parking for visitors as one question?
So as I mentioned before, all of the units do have a 2-car garage included. Our typical customers are mostly millennials, young working professionals, and empty nesters. So a lot of times they are even single family or single car families or single people buying these units. So there's some opportunity availability for potential parking in their own garages. We also do feel that there is ample street parking, both on Taylor and on Wynn Road. We've had a number of conversations with the city for this and talked about potentially opening up more spots on Wynn Road on the other side of the street, on the west side, I believe, and potentially having some kind of permitting system for Taylor Road if it does become an issue. But again, we build these kind of dense urban developments all over the place in the city of Cleveland, in the inner ring suburbs. And we don't typically provide guest parking. We have not had this be an issue for our other projects. We find that our clients that buy these type of properties, they understand urban living. They may be more transit oriented. They may be biking. This site is walkable to, I believe, 2 different RTA lines. So there's options there for public transit. And we just feel like we don't want to take up the site with surface parking. We feel like we'd rather give the amenities and the space for green space for the pedestrian areas over surface parking that we don't really feel is necessary.
Well, I appreciate that. I'd much rather see green space, but I am concerned about the parking. I hear what you're saying, and I assume then you think your typical customer base will be interested in these locations and that they don't typically have guests, evidently, or not that many.
Or that they are only going to be single people with 1 car.
Right.
I'm an empty nester. We each have a car. So
But
yeah,
I also did want to point out, Wynn Road is a very quiet, sleepy road.
Mhm.
And I hear what you're saying again, and I did consider that because for safety purposes, I really agree with not having this be a cut through. At the same time, we're talking about, let's say, 2 people are in each house with 2 cars. So there are now 60 cars exiting onto Wynn Road and Raymont and Washington Boulevard at 8 in the morning. I know that sounds ridiculous and unlikely, and yet one wonders what that would do to the neighborhood. So I assume, I know our planning commission does send out notifications, but I do hope all those neighbors are very well aware of what this might mean.
Everyone was notified.
So I would just like to echo my colleague's comment about the parking. This was something that came up in Planning Commission last week or 2 weeks ago. I was the only Planning Commission member that did vote no on it, just for that reason alone. I just want to say I'm really excited about this development. I think this is going to bring life to Cedar and Taylor. I remember when this came into conversation a year or 2 ago, I was thrilled, and I'm so glad you're doing this. I'm just really excited. I think this is going to really take off, and we're going to see more development in the community, which is really, really needed. The applicant did address some of the concerns the Planning Commission had, such as the rooftop decks with views of downtown. That was a selling point, and I wanted to make sure that that was addressed, and that was, so thank you very much. The sidewalks that enter the site from both sides and cross through the site was something that was brought up in Planning Commission, and that was addressed, so thank you very much. But the only thing that was not addressed, and something that's still a concern of mine, is guest parking. And it's not just guest parking, but it's parking for repair people. If someone is coming to fix your dishwasher or install your cable, I don't think I would want my cable guy to park in my garage. I think that's kind of an invasion of my space. But and deliveries and Uber Eats, but mostly for guests. I have guests in my house quite frequently. I guess I am a millennial and I do entertain. And it's just the two of us that live here, but we entertain and we have guests, and there would be no place for them to park. And if you're making this a selling point that these would be 4-bedroom homes, you know, there most likely will be 2+ cars in each household. So to say that these would be houses that all have 1 car, I think is beyond the point, because some of these will be up to 4 bedrooms. I would like to see the guest parking. The rule of thumb is typically 1 spot for every 2 units. So we're talking 15. But in the planning commission, we discussed that maybe you have 5 along Taylor and 5 on Wynn, that's permit only. I had a conversation with the law director, and it's something that we can do by ordinance separate from this, but something certainly to consider, because as my colleague mentioned, the parking on Taylor is used by the customers of those merchants. And if you're in units 1 through 8, that's your front door, and you should be able to park in front of your house, just like you and I can park in front of our houses and our streets. So I would like to see that become permit parking. I think that's something we can do by ordinance. Same with parking on Wynn Road. I think you could probably fit 4 to 5 vehicles. And again, that would benefit people in units 23 to 30. Again, that's their front door. And you'd be able to park in front of your front door. But it still has, what do we have here? 14 units without accessible parking. One thought we had in the planning commission was if you lost a unit or 2, such as unit 12 or unit 19, you'd be able to fit guest parking on there. Another issue that would come up is, what do you do with the snow in the winter? It's got to get pushed somewhere. It needs a little more breathing room. There was a little concern about the turnaround spaces or people backing out of garages. If you're backing out of unit 1, unit 9, 15, so on and so forth, it's a little tight. So I like where this is going. I think it needs a little further development. And I know we're just approving a site plan today. And I know this will be developed further. It's going to go to Architecture Review Board. But those are some issues that I have that I think are valid concerns. If I'm buying a $300,000 to $400,000 townhome, I'd like to have parking. The applicant raised the issue of this happens in Ohio City and Tremont, but that's in an urban dense area where there's street parking. And this is a dead end neighborhood where you drive through a neighborhood and then it dead ends into its own development. And so there isn't street parking within the development, it's only outside the development. So those are a couple of things I'd like the members of the council to consider before voting on this.
Thank you, Mr. Rock.
And I want to apologize for interrupting, Mr. Rock. I was trying to add to what you were saying, because I'm also thinking about family. You know, family come to visit. So there are many. And I must say, I was thinking about one of those giant, I don't even know what to call them, but giant cars, SUVs, trying to get into one of those far distant, yes, like maybe 30 or 1, and turn into the garage. I just thought that might be very unpleasant. So I'm glad it's going to Architecture Review Board. I hope some of these things are worked out, because I do have to say, visiting places, urban dense locations, not in Ohio, but Philadelphia and Chicago, it's just awful looking for street parking. So if we do work it out through permits, I think that would be much fairer to the people who are in this development than that whole search for a parking spot game that's so frustrating. But it is an amazing project and very exciting. So, and I do hope it spurs significant development along that corridor. That would be so wonderful.
I would have to echo. I think the whole idea of permit parking, it has to be seriously considered. I know that my son lives in Pittsburgh. He lives in Bloomfield, which is a very, very large Little Italy. So these tall, narrow buildings, all very close together, were all built like in late 1800s, early 1900s. And so the streets are very, very narrow. Almost, some of them, most of them are one way, but the only way you can park, because a lot of them, there isn't even a garage. But again, you're having guests or a service person come, you're not going to have them park in your garage, but they do permit parking. And so when we go visit, we're on the list, our license and our make and model of vehicle, that we're permitted to park there. It's the only way you can do it, because otherwise you will walk city blocks before you're going to get where you're going. So it's a tremendous development. It's really beautiful. I think it's going to be quite an enhancement to that area. I like that it looks very residential rather than overtly modern, which would be out of place. But the parking for guests concerns me as well. I think we've had some good ideas to try to address that, so I'll look forward to that being resolved.
Mayor,
Thank you. Mr. Gould.
thank you. I too share concerns about parking, although I think I diverge from my colleagues in not advocating for a permit system. And mine, of course, I'm open to continuing the conversation and seeing what that looks like for the neighborhood. But my initial thought is that, I respect and appreciate Knez. I love what you're doing, not only with this development, but with other areas of the city. I sit on the CIC as well, and you've been just a tremendous partner to us. So I appreciate that. But with what I'm hearing is that our customers don't desire additional parking. They desire these other things and value other things more, and therefore we are going to maximize the profit that we're able to turn from the property, absolutely fine goal, by not building in additional parking. I don't want to then turn the neighborhood into the site's parking lot when the decision was made by the developer not to build that parking on their site and risk additional profit. And so I would not want to live in a neighborhood where 30 townhomes and their guests were parking up and down my street at night. That's not what University Heights is. We don't do that here. We are not Tremont. We are not a place where people buy $500,000 homes with no driveway and find that to be acceptable. And so while I appreciate, the views of my colleagues, and then again, I'm open to further discussion on the matter and how that would affect both the residential side, and then on the other side, we want to spur development, and now we're talking about blocking off a portion of the street for permit parking. It feels like a bit of a disconnect, and it feels unfair for the surrounding businesses and for the surrounding residents to push the parking issues that are presumably created by the developer's choices onto the residents and the businesses. So I would also ask, on the issue of parking, for the fire chief or for the police chief, what would the parking situation be? Would there be, you couldn't stop, I presume. What would be the coded way in which you would prevent what is already, when empty, a narrow area from becoming dangerously clogged by stopping service vehicles, things like that?
That's a question for our police and fire chief?
Yes, I guess that they've been working closely with the developer on some of those issues.
We have, yes. For instance, care was taken to ensure that the turn radiuses here would accommodate our new ladder truck. And the design here does that. The ladder truck can get in and out of this development. And there was a meeting also with the police chief as well about the layout when it came to cut throughs and patrolling issues. But either of them, I think, can speak to that. Chief Rogers, Chief Perko, did you get the question that Councilperson Gould raised?
Yes, Mayor. The allotment in the internal turning radius between the units is sufficient as long as there's no permanent parking in there. So yes, there's a chance that there could be a delivery truck there temporarily, but we would not expect that anyone would have any permanent parking in those locations so that we can maneuver around.
So how would they be coded in there? So when you say temporary, how temporary could a person park there within code? Or would they be required not to park there, no stopping, red line for the entire area?
We would have to look further before we implemented like a fire lane for the entire area,
Okay.
but definitely the main artery going into it off of Wind, I would presume would be something that we would have to make sure that.
Okay. And then a question for Knez. So my understanding is that these are built to order so that you will be, let's look, I mean, how many phases, I guess, of what we have 8 phases? Is it each of these sites kind of is a different phase, and as they sell, you'll build? Or could perhaps unit 7, unit 21, and unit 27 be built at the same time while the others are waiting to be sold?
They would be built by building. So as you said, in 8 separate buildings. So units 1 through 4 would all be built at the same time. We have a set schedule in our development agreement on the property within which that timeline will complete the entire project. But our internal process is typically we like to try to pre-sell half of the units in a building before we start it. And that also is our trigger point to start the next building. So for this particular site, we'd likely start at the units on Taylor Road and work our way east across the site. A little bit further with our engineers once we know that we are fully approved on this site plan and that makes the most sense with the site improvements and utility work and all that kind of thing. But we will build it in phases by building. We would likely have 1 to 2 buildings under construction at a time. And again, we have that time frame that we are obligated to complete the whole project in.
And remind me again, Mayor, what was that timeline for completion of the site on the development agreement? Or Knez, if you know?
I believe it's 3 years.
3 years.
Right, yes, 3 years. Yeah.
And so as you're building out that site, should the neighbors, on the Wind Road side expect, like, are you storing your construction equipment? Is it the potential is that this will be a construction site for 3 years?
Potentially. We'll do what we can to minimize impact to the neighbors. We do have an area in the corner of the site that we don't have any buildings going on. So that would be logistically a laydown area for us to use, which keeps things away from the Wind Road side. We also have, personal builders that run the project, and they will knock on the neighbors' doors, go introduce themselves, give them their cell phone number, talk to them, and make sure that if they ever have any kind of issue, they know how to get a hold of us right away and we can take care of it and make sure that they're also apprised of what's going on so they're not surprised by any of the construction activities.
And in addition, Hannah, like we've done for the single family homes in University Heights, we have basically a pre-construction meeting with anyone in the neighborhood who is inclined to come to go over kind of what the schedule is, what to expect, and answer any questions then as well about the process.
Thank you.
I would like to address a point that has come up about the maximizing of the site and in fairness to the developer and also kind of placing it within the context of what we are going for here as a city. I would like to remind the council that we created the residential attached district ourselves, and that we created this to attract this kind of development, and that this development meets the zoning that we created and that the council and the planning commission all reviewed and passed. And the proposal here by Knez doesn't do anything that isn't permitted by the zoning that we implemented in an effort to attract this project. So, when we're talking in terms of how many units we have or they have proposed to put here, it is within the boundaries of what we've asked for through our zoning. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor, can I speak?
Yes, please, Mrs. Drucker.
So just to tag on to that for council, is that when the residential attached district was written, it was based on other density sites that were built with density in mind. And so the guest parking is not a requirement. And as the mayor stated, that did go through planning and that did go through council when we wrote this specific district for these specific parcels. So, and back then with the original discussions, the issue of street parking was brought up because of how much available street parking we have specifically on Taylor Road. So the only thing, so I don't want it that the builders choosing to build this and not putting in guest parking, that was never a requirement at the site. It was never brought up through any of our presentations and discussions with planning and council. And Knez has built to the requirements stated in our residential attached district, and they are not requesting any variances for the proposal that they are submitting.
Thank you, Mrs. Drucker.
And if I may add to that, NOACA actually did a traffic and parking study on the entire Taylor corridor from East Cleveland all the way down to Fairmount Boulevard. And one of their recommendations at the time, and I believe they did the counts in it was either 2018 or 2019. So this was pre-COVID, pre any disruption. Their recommendation at that time was actually to remove parking on Taylor Road in the Cedar Taylor district, because they found there to be ample parking at all times of the day. Morning rush hour, evening rush hour, lunchtime, all times of the day. There was on average 50% of the parking available between the lots on the Cleveland Heights and University Heights side and street parking.
Brennan, what was the time on that? You said between what time?
The traffic study was either done in 2018 or 2019.
You said the 50% was between this hour and that hour. I missed that part.
It was all day.
Oh,
yeah. So they typically do it, morning commute, lunchtime, evening commute, and all studies that they did show that there was ample parking.
so if NOACA believes that there could be less parking, does that remove parking, and then where do people go?
So that was just a recommendation. We have control over, the city has control over its parking, and if we do it, if we do not. So just because NOACA recommended at one point to remove parking, that does not mean we have to. And with this development coming in, I would recommend that we do not.
Okay.
Yeah, I could see permit parking on Taylor, but I have to agree with Mr. Gould's concern that to put permit parking in front of those homes on Wynn, then, where do the people who live on Wynn have their guests park? I don't know. I think it's got to be discussed and teased out a little further. I mean, certainly everything has looked great so far, but it didn't occur to me until my colleagues started bringing it up that the guest parking it seems inadequate.
I would also like to remind the council that we do own a lot on South Taylor Road that could potentially be used for a small parking lot if the parking concern is that great.
Well, and Mayor, if I may, I noticed the lack of guest parking as soon as I looked at this, because this is such a tight situation, tight drawing, and even for parking, getting in and out of the garages. But let me just be really clear from my own perspective. I would be very willing to discuss permit parking, say in a building committee meeting at a later date, if it becomes an issue. We typically don't start creating permit parking until there is an issue. So our concern is this looks like there might be an issue. And at that time, and if those people who live in that development or the businesses come to us and say, this is a real issue and we've got to do something about it, that's the time when council will start entertaining consideration of permanent parking, in my opinion. Because again, we're not talking about doing permanent parking right now. There's no need. But it may come up that we have to come up with some kind of solution. That was the only reason for bringing this up, to see if it had been considered and to put out that we may be looking at a solution in the future.
Yes, no, thank you, Mrs. Pardee. And I agree. I don't know that I would agree that we wouldn't have to entertain permit parking on the onset. It would be something that we could reserve as a possibility were it needed. And when it first came up during administrative review that there is no guest parking, that did concern me initially as well. And but I also listened and I observed the other Knez developments, and I went and I walked the site, and you know, it's not lost on me that because these parcels are not even combined, it's not that large. If I were to park in front of my own home and then walk up my driveway to my back door, I mean, that's practically the distance to the middle of this development. So walking from Wynn Road or Taylor Road into the development, it may not be as far as it seems when we're talking about 30 units. Also, there are other parking possibilities at Cedar Taylor. I mean, it's been brought up, for instance, you know, the city acquired and raised the Action Pest building. And I know that there have been calls for whether that could be developed into parking. That wasn't our first choice. But if we haven't developed it into something else and we find that there is a call for additional parking, then that is a possibility. Whether that would be parking that would be for guests here, or whether it would be parking that provides relief to folks who are using the laundromat, and then that frees up street parking. There are different pieces here that are in motion that could ameliorate a situation if it ends up being a situation. And I think that, you know, we contemplated when we created the zoning for this project that it would have a certain dense type of living, and we wanted to emulate projects of this kind that are more associated with Tremont, with Ohio City. And it was something that we were seeking to embrace for our city. So after consideration, I'm satisfied with not having specific surface parking spaces here on the lot, on the parcel, especially when every unit does have 2 parking spaces. And if you do have, also, if you don't use all of your parking, you could open up to your guests. That isn't so strange, especially in communities where you have 2 reserved spots for every unit. If you had somebody coming over that you knew and you wanted to guarantee that they had a spot, one way you could do is you yourself could move your car onto the street and tell whoever's coming, hey, I live in unit 14, text me when you get here, I'll open the garage door. And then there's no question and no confusion over where they need to park and how they get to you. So, and that's only in situations where they weren't familiar with the area. And then once they are, I think it will all work out.
Mayor, you're a much more welcoming host than I would be.
Yeah.
giving up your garage spot for your guests. That's very kind of you.
I just had.
Well, my mother lived in New York City, and we used to do those kinds of things. It's when you sign on to that kind of living, it's part of the adjustment. When my wife lived in Clintonville, and we lived and we had the apartment in the development there while we still had the house up here. I mean, we had permit parking for overnight parking, and without that permit, I couldn't park overnight around where we had our Clintonville apartment. But we could, you know, it's all part of the lifestyle when you choose to live this way.
I think you bring up a good point there. I just don't want to get into a place where we have very specific reasons for our parking street ban. And I think that if we implement permit parking in one area of the city, I would hate to see that model expand into other areas of our more residential spaces. And I think that if you have a building, a high density area, certainly let's have this new way of parking and a new way of being. I think we need to be accommodating to that in University Heights. We can't always want new things and then balk at them every time something new comes up, right? But also, when you have a housing unit that has the potential of having 4 bedrooms in it, we in University Heights have some very specific concerns about not wanting to have, for instance, another dorm room, or a situation where, you have a couple of these units and we hear the complaints in our residential neighborhoods. I can only imagine what they would be like in a high density area. So our street parking has some safety concerns and some very specific concerns from our police officers that they've shared about assisting and seeing down the road in the middle of the night, things like that. And so it's part of our tradition, and I'm willing to address it again, but I have some concerns around that, especially in context of high density.
I just had a couple comments. First of all, I want to thank Knez. This is so exciting, and I'm excited for the approval. In relation to the action pest control, I think that the city has much grander plans for this area than to put a parking lot right on Taylor Road. So I would not even want to consider that. I think this addition to that area, along with Cleveland Heights' investment in the area, is hopefully, within 5 years going to look very different. And to put a parking lot on prime real estate, I don't think would bode well for the city. In terms of Taylor Road, first of all, I do agree with Councilwoman Pardee. Until things are built and an issue actually comes up, we should not, by ordinance, make permit parking. She brought up a really great point that I didn't think about, and I was actually involved in an issue on one street a few years ago, as some other people were as well. And in the end, we didn't do permit parking when we all went in saying, yes, we need permit parking. The third point is I was actually part of that NOACA study. It was over 2 years in 2017 and 18 as a part of the businesses that were on Taylor Road. And NOACA kind of paused that for funding reasons, but they were actually leaning toward making this a two-way street. And that concerns me just in general, which just, accentuates the issue of permit parking on Taylor Road. If that ever happens, then, we put ourselves in a position where it's unattainable anyways. And then I guess the last point is that, everyone keeps saying, we want to emulate urban, but University Heights isn't urban. No. That's not the look that we were going to go for. That's not who we are. I think an amenity and the city of beautiful homes and everything else is that we are different than other communities. And having an amenity of parking for guests, and I'm not saying we need 15, maybe it's 5. And maybe it's taking part of that pocket park, even though I love the green space idea. But, 5 spots for me would satisfy that for me. And in terms of having people park in your garage, I don't know, Mayor, that is, you have really nice friends and family, because I go to New York all the time and they don't even pick me up from the airport. So they would never give up their spot. Come in my driveway, no way. But I think that's just a really hard ask. So I would love to see if we can figure out some type of parking. But I definitely agree with Councilwoman Pardee that we do not need to permit at this point.
So I have a question for the law director. If council is so inclined, it seems like there is some common concern about parking. If they approve the plan, is there a mechanism that we could place a condition that there be X number of parking spots on site? What would be the mechanism behind approving with conditions?
The mechanism would be to specify in your motion for approval what the conditions are. The council assumes essentially the same rights that the planning commission has in terms of review of the site plan. They're not bound by what is coming to them as a recommendation. Council, of course, is free to approve the recommendation, deny the recommendation, or to request alterations to the site plan by placing conditions upon an approval. I would add that my concern in instances such as this, where we have a permitted use as of right pursuant to the zoning regulations, along with a site plan that presents with no required variances, is that it begs the question as to whether a decision that obligates the developer to do something that it's not required to do by the zoning regulations creeps into the area of being arbitrary. Now, what I would say is that council has made a good record of establishing what is a legitimate health, safety, and welfare concern that is specific to parking. But I do want to caution council that it's a question that exists when you require a developer who's presenting a plan that's permitted and doesn't have variances. And so it will behoove the city to work with the developer.
Thank you. And you raised an excellent point, and I hope the developer is willing to work with us as well. I mean, given that the land is free, or there's a nominal cost, if there is, it's extremely nominal, but it's essentially free land. So I don't think it would come after us that we had implemented a condition that goes above and more stringent than the zoning code itself. But that's just my opinion. I do have one more question for the developer. Well, two questions. One, could you go over the snow removal mitigation? Where will the snow go when they're plowing?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, the HOA will take care of things like snow removal, and on these type of sites, if they don't have adequate space to push the snow, like at the end of the drive, we actually truck it off site.
So how did they do that? Do you have like a front end loader that comes in, or off a trailer? Like how does that work?
Yeah, I mean they'll take truckloads of snow off the site. We do it for all our projects.
So where would they park the trailer? I'm assuming it comes in on a trailer, right? And then they back it off and truck it into a dump truck. I mean, how does that work?
I could get some more information for you on the logistics from our management company, but we have a management company that runs the HOAs that takes care of all of that. And I do think this is maybe a good moment to address some of the other comments we've had on the density of this site. This is definitely a dense site for University Heights, and we understand this is a new housing type that we're bringing in, and it may look a little unfamiliar in this setting. For us, this is our bread and butter. This is what we do all day, every day, and this is maybe a medium density site for us compared to more urban sites. So these drives, we have 27 feet in there. That is almost 30% bigger than our typical drives where you can comfortably turn around a car. So it might just be a matter of looking at this flat on paper, but there is an ample amount of room to maneuver on this site. So it's not going to be an issue. If we can get a ladder truck in there, we can get anything in there that we need to. It's not going to be difficult backing in and out of that drive lane. So, we are used to handling these kind of issues in much tighter sites. So, and again, I'd be happy to get some more specifics from our management company specific to the snow.
Okay. And I'm only asking because I see how they do it in my driveway and it's tight, but they push the snow, they don't truck it out. So I was curious how that worked.
They'll push it if they can, but if it's too much, then they'd switch to trucking it out, so.
And is there any thought to, if the council requires on-site parking, is there any thought to using the pocket park area to fit in, 6 to 8 spots? I know that's Cleveland Heights and it's gonna have to go through Cleveland Heights, but is that something that the developer would be open to so you're not losing any units?
We are not
I believe that,
favorable to having a second curb cut on Taylor.
But
That
no,
is getting close to
Not
the
a curb cut, but access through the site, through between units 15 and 8. You just keep going north and there's like, I don't know, like 8 spots in there.
I'm skeptical that we could actually fit that in that space. Surface parking takes up a lot of room. I mean, if you look at the plan, you can kind of gauge the size of one of those 2-car garages. It's roughly 2 parking spaces. To get a clearance for your turning radius and to get those spaces, you might get 2 spaces in there with room to turn around. I don't believe that there's room on this site to accommodate without, totally reconfiguring our site plan, which we're not looking to do at this juncture.
Okay. And I think we beat this enough about the parking. So I have a suggestion that maybe council would want to entertain, but if we remove units 12 and 19, it looks like you could fit about 8 to 9 spots perpendicular to those structures there. I would like to entertain that as a motion, as a condition to the approval. And if that's something that somebody would want to second, we can entertain that. But I would make a motion that we approve the development as recommended by Planning Commission with the condition that we have 8 on-site parking spots.
Oh, we have a motion by Mr. Rock to amend, I think it was to amend the approval, or to have the approval be conditioned upon 8 to 9 guest parking spots. Is there a second to that motion?
I would like a clarification, Mayor, if we could. So you're saying that you would reduce the number of proposed units built from 30 to 28 in order to accommodate those additional parking spots?
Seems
Where
like
would
the only way to do it. Unless
I mean,
they come up with
where would you be putting those? I love the idea of additional parking spots. Where would you be putting them?
My recommendation would be where units 12 and 19 are. So you'd have 3 units and then 3 in the south. So it's like they kind of mirror image each other.
Mhm.
That's my recommendation. But again, if there's a more cost-effective and more creative way for that solution, I'm open to that.
Okay, we have a motion. I'm sorry.
I don't
go
know,
ahead.
do you have to have a second before there's any discussion? I don't know if that's.
That's really what we should do, yes.
Well, but before there's a second, if I could just chime in for a moment, my recommendation would be that whatever the condition is that's placed, be as specific as possible, since we're trying to achieve a site plan approval. It makes sense for whatever approval is given to be as clear as it can be. That's my recommendation.
Okay, very good. Just then for clarity, Mr. Rock, would you state with precision what your intended motion is?
Okay, for better clarity of the motion is that I would approve the Planning Commission's recommendation of the approval of the site plan with the condition that the developer constructs 28 units with 8 on-site parking spots. Do I need to give a location then? Does it need to be that specific?
I don't know that it does. I think what you're doing with that motion then is you're leaving it to the developer to decide which two it would give up.
Right.
I mean, I see what you're saying about 12 and 19.
It makes the most sense to put it there, but
But-
there may be a more economical way to do it. And
No.
Is it all right for me to weigh in on that just quickly?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, you know,
Just,
I'm sorry, as a point of order, Mr. McConville, do we need a second before we can have discussion? In which
No.
case, no, we don't. Okay, very good. Then Hannah, please go ahead.
I just want to mention, there is a grade on the site. It's on a bit of a hill, so we're going up towards Wynn. I don't know that it's feasible for us to put parking spaces where you're saying. I'm not sure that we can actually accommodate that request. So I don't know that 12 and 19, the way the grading is going to work, because there's going to be some steps between those units. I'm not sure we can flat park that. So I hear your concerns, but I don't know
what's
off the top of my head that definitely is feasible.
What is the grade difference?
I'd have to check our civil drawings for that, but
I think what Hannah is asking, if I can jump in, is that if there's going to be a request that we lose units to accommodate the parking that the council member has requested, that it be left up to us to decide which units are removed, if that's all right with council.
That's what I'm hoping to.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Mr. Purdy, go ahead.
Sorry, John, to interrupt. I like the aesthetics of this very, very much. And I see where part of the aesthetics are. You have that parking inside, where in garages. So the people that live there are able to walk, be in their green space, and not really have to look at cars. Is there a way, if 2 units were given up, to create that kind of parking, 8 spaces, and keep it somehow aesthetically pleasant, so you're not just looking at cars, I guess, is my question.
Like maybe where unit 23 is, that seems
That's
like,
what I was just gonna say.
yeah, that's another possibility.
I would just like to chime in. I believe that's an important point that we'd like to make. To have surface parking spaces butted right up against your unit is much less desirable for the buyers. It's not a pleasant pedestrian experience. It's not great to look out your dining room window and you're looking at a parking lot. It's much more desirable for us to have that as green space. And I do want to go back just to the zoning code for a moment. Part of it asks for that our design would minimize conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles. So we focused on that in this site plan significantly because it is one of the criteria that we're conforming to per the residential attached zoning. It's spelled out in there that should be a priority. So it feels like we're going away from that being a priority, and now we're prioritizing vehicles over the pedestrian experience, and we're not looking at separating them. In addition, the unit 23 is the unit that borders a single family home. It's the only part of our site that borders a single family home. So we wanted to be a little bit more sensitive to that neighbor. That's why we have that kind of special unit there. So they're not looking at a garage. They're not looking at the drive. They're looking at some landscaping and the side of a house, and it feels compatible to the residence that's there.
You know, I see that tiny little pocket park. I don't know if maybe it was Mr. Rock that mentioned earlier that possibly that could be used for guest parking to accommodate the people that are going to pay this much money to live here. And everybody keep emphasizing how this is very urban, like Ohio City or like Tremont. So while that's lovely, if you're going to talk about keeping the cars away from being butted up against someone's unit, or you know, being something that isn't, that corner could be used for parking possibly. It's just a thought.
Mayor?
Oh,
Yeah. Mr. Gould.
So, you know, I just, I have a reflection on this process, but before I reflect, I just wanted to kind of ask, Hannah and Michael, you've heard the concerns that the council has about this, and I feel like we're getting into like this weird micromanaging where like members of council are, well, what if we took this pocket park? What if we took these units? Is there a way you can make this work with surface parking? Like, I mean, you've been asked this in the planning commission. It's not a new idea. I'm sure somebody internally has given some thought to the fact that Councilman Rock raised this at the planning commission level. You're hearing from all of your partners on this council our concerns around this. Is there something that you can, and to Councilman Rock's point, this is, a wonderful opportunity for the city and also for Kenez, I think to do this work. Is there a way you can make this work? And is there a way that we can, given our concerns, say this in a way that you find palatable?
We've spent maybe a year on this site plan doing different iterations. We've been working with the CIC on it. We've adjusted it several times for different involved parties' requests for, we had units that were crossing over into Cleveland Heights before, so we moved the whole development south to avoid that complication. We have more paving now than we originally did, again, to address some of the life safety concerns from the fire and the police department. So we didn't just land on this as our site plan initially. We have been working on this and massaging it for over a year. We feel strongly that this is the best site plan that we can make work, that is functional, that works for our customers, that we know we can successfully build, develop, and sell. We believe in this plan strongly. I don't want to give you answers off the top of my head without drawing it out, but I don't believe there's room for eight parking spots on this site. I don't know that we can make that work.
So, I'm going to move on to my reflection then, on this idea. We have a zoning code. We passed this zoning code for particularly this purpose, specifically this purpose. And I think we made a mistake. I think we probably should have said something about there being a parking space per unit or something to that effect. I've had conversations with Councilman Rock. I think it was just an expectation that that's the way things are built. And of course, no one would come in and not put a parking space like that. And so it wasn't just something we thought of. Or we did, to your point, during the discussions, it sounds like, Mrs. Drucker talked about street parking being something that was contemplated at that time. And so I just, for me, when we have a zoning code, when somebody has come in and developed something, I don't like the idea of then turning around and saying, okay, we're going to basically impose a zoning code that doesn't exist for this project that you've now worked up and entered into the agreement halfway through. I know that we can do that. I don't like that. Also, I know maybe it's a naive thing, but I think there's something about partnership. And Kenez has been a great partner to us in the city. They've worked with us on several instances. I'm thinking of a time where they had right to own a property and then gave it back to us when we asked for it. And so there's a portion of this where they've heard from us. We are their partners. They work with us on several projects within the city. They hear this council say these things. And if there's some way to work it out, I hope that they do. And that when it comes back to us for, final approval, that if there is a possibility to take this into consideration, that they take it into consideration and that there's an amendment made. But I don't like the idea of members of council, myself included, looking at this plan and Councilman Rock, frankly, who's raised the concern, is the only one of us that kind of has this professional expertise to kind of nitpick this site, and it feels like a late in the game decision to come in and say, well, why don't you move this here? Why don't you move that there? To the point that, that Hannah raised, we don't know the grades of the property, right? And so we're about to take out these 2 units of the property and say you have to put parking spaces there. And what happens when that just doesn't work for the grade of the site? So, I share the frustrations. I really do. I wish that there was parking provided there. And I hope that something happens to make that a reality. I just don't know that we need to impose that.
I would agree, Mr. Gould. And I'd also remind the council that 4 of the 5 planning commission members did approve of this site plan without guest parking, without upsetting the aesthetics or the design that has been put here by the applicant. I mean, Kenez has made a number of adjustments to this project. It is still essentially what it's been from the start, which 30 units, high density for us, median density for them, and at no time in the last 2 years that we've been looking at this was there ever guest parking contemplated. And likewise, it was never part of the zoning. The kind of high density project that we're doing here and the aesthetics of it, you don't want to look out at cars, at other people's cars. It is by losing 2 units, yes, that is true that not only would Kenez be losing, the income from 2 units, but we as a city would also be losing the income from 2 units. That is the income tax that we would collect, and ultimately after the abatement, the property tax we would collect on 2 additional units. And over time, that's considerable, and that ends up being the cost of these parking spaces. And I think that is something that we should think about very carefully.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Mayor. I don't mean, I hate to double speak, but I just wanted to make one more point on this. When I heard Hannah say, this is my bread and butter, this is our bread and butter, that's the other thing that I'm weighing heavily here. If the project doesn't sell, it's on Kenez. They've invested so much here. They want this to succeed. They want to sell as many units as possible. And if in their market research and the program or the buildings that they do, the projects that they do, parking on site was important, I think that there would be parking there on site. And so while I would not buy a unit that I can't have my friends over to and be able to spend the night without trying to find a place to park at University Heights, that doesn't mean that their customers won't, or there's not a market for that. So sorry, that was the last point I wanted to make.
No, thank you, Mr. Gould. I think there's validity to that. I mean, when Hannah says this is their bread and butter, it also means that they know what they're doing, and they've done this many places. And I have, the confidence of their experience here. This is not their first townhome development. It's not even their 5th or 10th townhome development. This is what they do.
Mayor, may I make one last comment for me?
Yes, Mrs. Pardee, please go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate the time to talk about this. This is not something we are all expert in, but in my time, both on city council and observing, I feel that there's been a lot of rollover because developers were willing to come in and do something for us, and we didn't pay close enough attention. I am very happy that we've looked at this carefully and had this discussion. I think it's a wonderful plan, but I also think it's very important for those of us who are on council and reviewing this to have this kind of discussion, because we have the broader view, the interests of the city at heart. We are not experts, but we do represent the residents of the city. So I'm very happy that we did have this discussion. I do not want to see the loss of the pocket park. I agree with Councilman Rock concerning parking, but I do not see how it works in this design at this time. And I've heard what the developer is saying. So I would urge you, Mayor, to, if you will, with Mrs. Drucker, to look for where we can add parking if it's needed from this point out, both on the street or if there are places not the location you mentioned earlier, but
Yeah.
reasonable places to look for in case this becomes a problem. But I would support going forward and approving this so that it can go to the Architectural Review Board. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Pardee. I would note that there was a motion made. We don't have a second. If there is no second, then it would fail for want of a second. So I will call one last time for a second.
I think I'd like a restatement, and I apologize. I think I'd like a restatement after all of this. What was that motion? Because I think it sort of took off in another direction.
Sure. Sure, and I kept it kind of open-ended because I didn't want it to have this go all the way back to planning commission if they redevelop a site plan. So I'm not trying to slow you down. I'm just trying to make this as easy and flexible as possible for you, so this can get going as soon as possible. So what the motion was to approve the recommendation of planning commission for the site plan with the condition that there would be 28 units and 8 on-site parking spots.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Would there be a second then? If not, then the motion fails for want of a second. Okay.
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Gould.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the planning commission's recommendation to approve the Knez South Taylor project as approved by the planning commission.
Very good. We have a motion to accept the recommendation from the Planning Commission for site plan approval for Knez Homes for the South Taylor Place condominium units on South Taylor Road by Mr. Gould. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Erdl. Is there any discussion? If there is no discussion, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Okay.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. By a vote of 6-1, the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. David. Thank you, Hannah, for both being here. Thank you, Michael, for both being here this evening.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for your time.
Very good. Next then is item B, Ordinance 2021-01, authorizing the mayor to enter into a letter agreement with Ryan Associates for the performance of an information technology needs assessment and strategic plan and declaring an emergency. Mr. McConville, I know you had some things to say about this because you were working on the document. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to draw council's attention to a few changes that were made to the proposed agreement with Ryan Associates from the prior version of the agreement that had been provided and was previously reviewed. There are basically 4 updates. On page 9 of the agreement, there is a addition to the final report that will be given to indicate that that report will provide recommendations on the integration of the police, fire, and city hall IT systems. On the same page, under confidentiality and security plan for information sharing, there's an additional representation that Ryan Associates is making that the information and data provided by the city will be kept in a secure fashion. On the following page, page 10, under terms and conditions, the payment plans, the payment conditions have changed fairly substantially. Payment is now 25% upon signature, 25% upon providing an invoice, indicating that 1/2 of the work is completed by hours, and then the remaining 50% upon completion. The total cost is capped so that if the hourly invoices that are submitted are below the total fee amount of 18,500, then the city does not have to pay whatever that delta is. However, if the hours indicate services that are rendered in an amount that's greater than the 18,500, the city's fee is capped at the 18,500. So there's a significant change in benefit in those terms. And then lastly, on the last 2 pages of the proposal, Ray and Associates has specified who the project lead will be, Mr. Paul Hugenberg. And they've also identified the particular members of their IT staff who will be working on our project.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. McConville. Are there any questions, comments, statements at this point?
Mayor,
Yes, Mrs. Party.
thank you. I just wanted to point out that thanks to the law director's work with Ray and Associates, we do have this updated version of what they are going to do. They have broken it down into phase 1, information security assessment, phase 2, infrastructure network hardware assessment, phase 3, a server assessment, phase 4, critical software assessment, phase 5, compliance assessment, phase 6, future landscape assessment, and phase 7, the final report. So it is broken down in the way that the Technology Advisory Commission wanted to see it. I did share this with the chair of the Technology Advisory Commission, Ted Troxel, who thought it looked good. So on that basis, I am very pleased with this and ready to support it fully. Again, this is separate from what we're going to see about Starfish later on. This is a needs assessment, auditing what we have on hand in the city and a strategic design for the future. What we're going to see later in terms of the Starfish ordinances revolve around services we are currently using and need for the city.
Okay. Yes.
If I could, just for a moment, I would also note that Connor Mundy appears on the Zoom. He's the individual over at Ray that I was working with. Council may have the opportunity. He appears to have toughed it out through item A on the agenda. If council has any questions, he may be able to answer them.
Okay. All right. Yes, I see Mr. Mundy is here. Are there any questions? Okay. All right. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I would like to move approval of Ordinance 2021-01, authorizing the mayor to enter into a letter agreement with Ray and Associates for the performance of an information technology needs assessment and strategic plan and declaring an emergency.
A second.
Okay, very good. We have a motion by Mrs. Pardee to enter the contract on emergency. We have a second by Mrs. Berry.
May I ask the law director one question? Should we be indicating not to exceed 18,500 in this motion?
No, it's in the contract, so that's a specific contractual term.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you for the clarification.
And I would just note, Mayor, From a parliamentary standpoint, although we're on emergency, this is our second reading, so we're only calling the roll to adopt.
Yes, very good. Thank you for the reminder. Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. Next, item C, motion to enter a contract with Baldwin Wallace University Community Research Institute to survey University Heights residents regarding potential changes in city's solid waste and recycling collection methods. I believe it would be appropriate to call on Councilperson Gould to discuss this matter. Mr. Gould?
Thank you, Mayor. We had a committee meeting to discuss the survey, which was initially suggested to be done by GT Associates, and we brought that to committee to discuss and see if there were any alternatives that we were able to find. One such alternative was found with Baldwin Wallace and their organization, which has the excuse me, I'm trying to pull up the actual excuse me. I had it up and now it's disappeared. So this is a proposal. Excuse me, guys. I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to pause my screen while I turn it so we're not all looking at me sideways.
Take the time you need, Mr. Gould.
Again, my apologies. Kelly, can I share my screen, see if this will actually work?
Yes, it's on. Share screen is on.
Thanks so much. Okay. I am having some technical issues, so I'm just going to work through those by just talking about the presentation. We had the actual document for us at the committee level. So this was what we ended up doing was going to Baldwin Wallace and speaking to the Community Research Institute. There was a project proposal that they put together for us that was revised and presented at our committee meeting last week. Basically, the proposal was, as we had hoped for, to have a paper mailer sent out to every household in University Heights, approximately 4,500 households. There would be a paper survey and the potential to also have a web link to that survey with the goal of collecting about 400 surveys. Dr. Sutton, Thomas Sutton, presented this to the committee, and the goal was, or that the idea or hope was that we'd have about 400 responses. The timeline for the project was 6 to 8 weeks, and the budget breakdown was for survey design, management, data analysis, and report development, $1,500. Now, there were additional items that we were looking to gather, and the mayor and Mike Cook, our communications director, assisted us in trying to get additional information from our printer. Because the second half, and really the bulk of the project cost, is for the printing, collating, stamping, and sending out of those surveys, plus postage. So that the service was about $1,250 for the printing, collating, stamping, and mailing. And the postage costs were approximately $1,700 on top of that. There's also an overhead fee of $500. So the total amount for the project was $5,860, which was including the postage and printing. Now, one of the issues that we have is that we were not sure whether or not the city would be able to have an imprint or use a mailer, the printer's imprint. So we've gone to our current printer and asked whether or not we would be able to use their services. We're still, Mayor, if we haven't had a response yet on the final numbers with the most recent questions that we posted, have we?
I don't know, Mr. Cook, did you hear anything further from Porath? We did get that preliminary quote, but we had a postage question.
I'm coming.
Yes, Mr. Cook.
All right, thank you. No, we exchanged emails earlier in the day, and Porath is taking a look at that. I'm hoping to have something in the. I was hoping that we'd hear back from them tonight. Yeah, they seem to misunderstand as Councilman Gold alluded to, the whole postage return thing. Obviously, we don't want to pay for postage when only 10, 15, 25% of people are going to respond back. So I'm hoping to get the details from them tomorrow morning.
Thanks so much, Mike. So here's, at this point, what
Okay, Justin, you're muted now.
what I'd like to do is to present then the committee has requested that, or the record has recommended that the survey be completed by Baldwin Wallace. Some of the things that we appreciated about them was that they weren't the person or entity that did the study, the solid waste study. Also, they come from this from an academic perspective and have done this type of community-based survey in the past. A door-to-door household survey is actually something that the form of the survey, door-to-door actually being mailed to every household, is a little different than they've done in the past. They're used to working more in a technological space. But overall, some of the concerns that members of council had by the GT proposal are covered by the Baldwin Wallace proposal. As I've explained, this project has two portions: the survey creation, data analysis, and then the overhead portion, and then the mailing and postage portion. And because we don't yet have an understanding of what we will do with the printing, if we will use the Baldwin Wallace suggestion, but the problem is we don't have a postage imprint. My suggestion to this evening is that we authorize the mayor to enter into the agreement with Baldwin Wallace for up to $2,000. This will cover the $1,500 portion of the survey design, management, data analysis, and report development, so we can get started on that work. It also authorizes the $500 overhead fee. That's 10% of the direct cost. And so with that amount being paid to Baldwin Wallace, we can work out the details with our printer as it comes to as it applies to printing and postage.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Gould. Are there any questions for Mr. Gould or discussion? Is there a motion?
Mayor, I'll make a motion to authorize us to enter into an agreement with Baldwin Wallace for the completion of a solid waste survey and authorize a contract not to exceed $2,000.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilperson Gould to enter into the contract with Baldwin Wallace University in an amount not to exceed $2,000 for the study, or rather for the survey, and we have a second by Mrs. Pardee. Very good. Any discussion? All right, seeing no further discussion, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
Thank you,
Next.
Mayor. And I'll return to council once we have the postage and printing situation handled. And again, my apologies for the technical difficulties this evening.
All right, very good. Next then is item D, Resolution 2021-08, urging Governor DeWine and the Ohio Department of Public Health to include law enforcement officers in the Tier 1B regarding the distribution of COVID-19 vaccine and to increase the amount of vaccine sent to Cuyahoga County to accomplish this request. I'll take a moment first to speak on this. I would like to say that this was in part inspired by communications from our police chief, Chief Rogers. I can tell you also as a mayor that I've joined my fellow mayors in writing and signing a letter to the governor and his staff urging that this be done. I welcome and encourage and was delighted to hear that council was inclined to also do this resolution. I understand the rationale that's been put forth by the governor and his staff that you know, vaccine is scarce and they want to, you know, put the vaccine into the arm of a 75-year-old, you know, over a healthy 30-year-old who happens to be a police officer. I get that to a point, but at the same time, I also get that we ask our police officers to work under these conditions, under COVID conditions, and they are not in a position to unlike a 75-year-old who may be getting the vaccine, they are able to take care to avoid instances of possible transmission more easily than our police officers are in the course of their duties. I don't want to steal Chief Perko's thunder, but he rightfully pointed out this morning in a discussion about this that the CDC, in fact, did recommend that police officers be part of the 1B group, and Ohio has not followed that. They've gone their own way, and we do think that Ohio ought to take another look at this. We know vaccine is scarce, and we're not saying that other people aren't worthy of it, but we do have a real need here, and we believe that it ought to be met. Chief Rogers, I'm sure you have some things you'd like to say about this.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. First, on behalf of all of your police department employees, I would like to again thank the mayor and council for any public support regarding this resolution and cause. Also, I'd like to mention that one of our own officers, Lieutenant Todd Kinley, who is a member of our command staff and also our local FOP Lodge president, did some work to get this resolution template on the radar for possible consideration. So again, I'd like to thank Lieutenant Kinley, as well as, again, the mayor and council for any support for this. As the mayor indicated, law enforcement is a critical service that officers in the field don't always have the ability to ensure and maintain social distancing while we're providing emergency type services to the public, be it first aid or CPR, or dealing with a subject that has to be taken into custody. So this type of resolution obviously will go a long way in ensuring that we can maintain critical and essential services to the public going forward. Across the state, our department's no different in that we've had difficulty with staffing levels at various times since the beginning of the pandemic. We can get on a vaccination list soon or a phased plan soon. It would definitely enhance our services going forward during the pandemic. So thank you again.
Very good. Chief.
I would like to say that I think people don't, they think of police officer, they think of a traffic stop, or they think of, something similar. Having been a person who was in an accident where the car was totaled, police officers are usually first on the scene before fire rescue arrives. And so they are the first person there. And like the chief said, and like Chief Perko said, they may have to render actual physical aid, whether it's, getting somebody out of a vehicle or giving them CPR or whatever. They are that, the term first responder really applies, and it's essential that these folks be able to be as well protected as possible while serving us. They often have to. So I'm delighted to put my name to this.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Blankfeld. Chief Perko, I know I stole your thunder there, but do you have anything you'd care to add as long as we're here?
I would just add that I support this in every way. Obviously, as public safety partners, we need to be able to rely on each other. We rely on the police department to assist us at all times, and we're a team out there serving the community. So I would hope that they would be considered in this.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Chief.
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Hardy.
I absolutely support this. I was rather shocked and appalled to learn that police people weren't on the 1B list. One question for our fire force and police force, what percentage or number of the staff are vaccinated to date?
Well, on the police, I don't know if there's anybody, Chief.
I would add that at this time, I've not requested to obtain that information from staff, but given we're not currently part of a phased rollout plan, I have not felt it necessary at this time to obtain that information yet.
Chief Perko, do you have any numbers that you are able to share at this time?
I do not have definitive numbers, as I have not requested those yet. I do have a staff survey prepared. However, due to our involvement of our members working at the COVID vaccination sites, I can confidently expect that at least half of our workforce has received it.
Okay, very good.
Chief Rogers, do we have any officers that work with the schools at all? Because I know when I received my first vaccine last Thursday, there were lots of officers who are resource officers or work security for school districts or private schools, and they were there and they were eligible because they are involved with a PK through school. Do we have any officers that fall into that category or no?
We do have officers that work throughout the region, be it security details or extra duty employment, where some of those circumstances could likely arise where they could be affiliated with some type of security or employment that would likely be subject to vaccinations or the possibility to get vaccinated, but nothing in University Heights at this time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt this resolution?
Also move, Mayor.
Very good. We have a motion by Mrs. Blankfeld to adopt. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Berry. Any further discussion? Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rott,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. I'll be sure to Once this is all signed, I'll be sure that the governor's staff gets this. Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is item E, Ordinance 2021-09, authorizing permanent appropriations for current and other expenditures of the City of University Heights, Ohio for the period commencing January 1, 2021 and ending December 31st, 2021. This is on first reading. Mr. Kennedy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. The items in attachment A by department and fund represent what was agreed upon based on the outcome of the two Finance Committee and Citizen Advisory Committee meetings that were held in the past several weeks. All the changes that the Vice Mayor had requested in terms of adjustment to the general fund and to the amounts in both some special revenue funds and the capital fund were accommodated. So these amounts as listed on the attachment are what will be submitted to the council for second reading on, I believe it's March 1st.
Okay.
Be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Are there any questions for Mr. Kennedy?
I just wanted to thank Mr. Kennedy and the Finance Advisory Committee, as well as the administration and council members. This was a difficult budgeting period, and really a lot of work on Mr. Kennedy's part was done, you know, before and after each meeting. He has excellent ideas. He is extremely capable and knowledgeable, and you know, found even additional ways to help, you know, get this budget to a more palatable number for us. And I'm glad that we came to this place, you know, a few meetings before March 31st. And I just want to thank him again.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
I'd also like to echo that sentiment. This was a very long process. There were some difficult conversations we had, and we got through it. And I think this is a much more responsible budget for 2021. And with the addition of the CARES money that we secured last year, this is something that we can use in 2021. And it gets us so much closer to that balanced budget that council was looking for. So I'm happy about that.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Rock. Any further discussion? If not, this matter is on first reading, and we will consider the first reading to be had. Moving on, we are on to item F, a motion to approve the price quote provided by Starfish for emergency support and service for 7 months, March through September 2021. I'll go ahead and take a stab at this. We have been using Starfish for our emergency support for IT. Earlier in the meeting, we did pass the ordinance authorizing me to enter into the letter agreement for the performance of an IT needs assessment. That's going to take some time. And even after the assessment is done, there will be another round of bidding for implementation of same. So we are currently in a quote with Starfish that expires at the end of this month. I asked Starfish to go ahead and provide us a quote going through September. My feeling was with the time that RE has expressed for its needs, and then the time it will take to bid, select a bidder, and begin implementation, I would prefer to avoid any disruption in service with Starfish. And since it will likely go into the summer, I did not want to have to call a special meeting over the summer to make ongoing arrangements for IT. So I did ask that that Starfish go ahead and give us a quote for monthly services going out 7 months through September. And it's a little bit higher than what the last one was, specifically because we've observed that the city's needs have been just a little bit more than what we were previously quoted, and we want to make sure that what we ask for and what we authorize line up more closely to what we are actually doing. Secondly, we did have a bit of a computer emergency regarding Mr. Cook's computer. It completely died on us and we needed to replace it. So that was not contemplated in the last Starfish quote. And since we arranged for the new computer through Starfish, it also makes sense to ratify the purchase of that machine to tidy up everything with regard to our work with them. So the delay in getting the quote out to you today was because the earlier quote that was provided to us last week didn't necessarily cover what our actual spending was. And I wanted to make sure that we had a revised quote that more accurately accurately reflected what we tend to spend as a city. And that's basically it. So I need to pull up, because it's separate from the packet that I had, the figures. The total for 7 months with Starfish would be $38,850 plus the workstation is another $3,261.95. So what we would be looking for is a motion to approve both those amounts together. Are there any questions? Is there any discussion?
Here, I just had one question. So does Mr. Cook have a laptop issued to him and a workstation? $3,000 for a workstation sounds like an awful lot of money. I don't want to nickel and dime anything because I think the quote in general is fair, but that's a lot of money for a workstation. I have to purchase those a lot through our IT department.
Well, it is a laptop together with the docking station and so on. The quote does have the machine, the specs on.
He doesn't currently have a docking station?
The docking station that he had, I don't believe was compatible with the new machine. And I don't believe there was a machine that was appropriately compatible with the docking station.
Mayor,
Yes.
I actually want to echo Vice Mayor Weiss's observation, especially, I mean, nowadays you could buy things off the shelf for less, so I'm a little bit surprised, but I do want to say that I think your estimation of the time for the for Ray and the Technology Advisory Commission and the whole plan to play itself out is just about that amount of time. I would hope we will have the RFP completed and someone selected for services sometime around September. And I don't think that's too aggressive, but I do think extending this through September makes a lot of sense. So thank you. And I think it looks good. I would support this.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. And I understand, you know, the off-the-shelf price is going to be different on the lap. This includes, I mean, they went ahead and set up everything as well. So, you know, that there is that to consider. You know, whether they broke that out or, I mean, it says parts and labor here. So, you know, the thing is they did set up Mr. Cook's machine and continued to make adjustments as needed. And as for the timing, I do agree. I'm hopeful that by the end of September we'll be well on our way. I don't think we would happen sooner than that. So, and also, again, because of the summer, I wouldn't want to have to call an August meeting or a July meeting just to add on a month or two. There may be other reasons, but let's not create this one.
Appreciate that. So I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve the price quote provided by Starfish for emergency support and service for 7 months, March through September 2021, and for the purchase and setup of Mr. Cook's computer. What was the dollar amount, Mayor?
Yes, for the 7 months, it was $38,850. For the computer, it was $3,261.95 for a total of $42,111.95.
So can I say not to exceed that amount?
I think so, in an amount not to exceed $42,111.95.
Thank you. That's it.
Very good. So moved by Mrs. Pardee. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Mr. Erdl. Any discussion?
I would have to agree, I was initially concerned with the length of time for the 7 months, but after speaking with Mrs. Pardee, that does make sense with what we have set up with Ray, and then actually, confirming with whomever it is we're going to go with. And it says that there's the backup disaster recovery device is property of Starfish, although they made it clear that anything that they were going to put into use for us would be usable by whomever ends up being the vendor that we go forward with. So that's all good. I would just hope we don't buy any more computers for $3,261.
Well, to be clear, that device that's property of Starfish, if you look, that's a loaner item.
Okay,
Yeah, so that's we're basically renting that from them. So
okay.
it is their property.
Wait, so that actually, again.
So that's $7,700?
Well,
No,
no,
it wasn't intended to be a long-term solution.
so again, I don't want to nickel and dime this computer because this is really a mute point. I think I want to do this. I'm going to vote for it, but I want you to relook at that computer, because most times what companies do is it's lease to own and you buy it out for $1, and you shouldn't be paying $3,000 for a computer that's not ours.
No, I think we're talking about two different computers here.
Mr. Cook's computer?
I was talking about the computer. I was talking about the loaner switch and server that's located on the $38,000 quote.
Oh, that's okay, fine.
That isn't ours, but it's $7,700. And although part of my comment was the over $3,000 for Mr. Cook's computer.
Right. Understood.
Seems excessive.
There's nothing further. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Finally, we are on item G, a motion to hold an executive session immediately following this regular meeting for the purpose of discussing personnel, legal, and/or real estate matters. There are 2 real estate matters to update the council on briefly. I don't believe it'll take very long, but nevertheless, an update is called for, and I would ask for a motion for an executive session for the 2 real estate matters at the end of the regular portion of this meeting.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Thank you, Mrs. Blankfeld.
Second.
Second by Mr. Gould. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee, Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. We will hold that executive session at the end of the regular portion of the meeting, and we.
Mayor?
Yes.
Before moving on to director's reports, I had an additional motion for an add-on item. I think I texted you about it. I know I spoke to the vice mayor about it. And I just wanted to make a motion to add on a discussion at the request of Councilwoman Berry. Item, I guess, would be H, discussion during the month of Black History Month on the Black National Anthem.
Oh, yeah, you know what? I see your text now and somehow I overlooked it. I am so sorry.
No worries, not at all.
Yes, why don't you make a motion, please?
So Mayor, I'd make a motion to add item H to the agenda, a brief discussion on the Black National Anthem during the Black History Month.
Okay, very good. We have a motion by Mr. Gould to add agenda item. There's a second by Mrs. Berry. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. We are now on item H. An item to recognize the Black National Anthem and to take a moment to speak briefly about its significance in history. Mr. Gould, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a tradition, as so many cultures have in the Black community, of respecting our elders. So I got a call from Councilwoman Berry, who talked about the need to have a moment to focus our attention around the Black National Anthem. I said, yes, Sandra, that sounds amazing. I like that idea. And she said, and I think that talking about the Black National Anthem would be a great thing to do during this Black History Month. And I said, you know what, that's great. It is a good addition to the work we've already done around the recognition that we've signed off already on this month to recognize Black History Month. And she finished and she said, and I think it would be great if you did it, Justin. And I said, wait, what? So she got me through to the point of there. And then I said, well, you know what, Sandra, for you, I will do that. Lift Every Voice and Sing is otherwise known as the Black National Anthem, is a song that I have sung since my days in middle school in the CHUH system, Monticello Middle School, on our touring choir. And it dates back over 100 years. James Weldon Johnson wrote the words to this poem, and 5 years later, his brother James put the words to music, and it was in commemoration of Lincoln's birthday. And I promise you, I'm going to let you know right off the bat, I'm not going to sing the Black National Anthem or Lift Every Voice and Sing today, but I would like to talk about its meaning to me and some of its lyrics.
Okay.
On James Weldon Johnson, one of the things that always fascinates me about the excellence of the men and women of that generation is how educated they were, how multifaceted they were, the different roles that they played. Mr. Johnson was an author and a songwriter. He was an educator and an attorney. He was an activist. And he also was a diplomat. And he was actually appointed by President Roosevelt to be to work at the consulate in Venezuela and also Nicaragua. And that to me is just amazing. That one individual would have the opportunity to wear so many hats, especially a Black man in 1900s. That is early 1900s. That is something to me that's important, and it is an area where I take particular pride. So the words of Lift Every Voice and Sing hearken to some of the major themes that repeat themselves in African American culture. First being our collective efforts towards something larger than ourselves. The first line of the first stanza is lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. The idea that together we are able to affect collective change, not only in our communities, but even in the celestial sense. And there's also the theme of remembrance of our struggles. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod. And this is in memory of times that have been hard, to recognize and honor, even in the midst of a celebration of a song, times in our histories that we have felt at our lowest. And I think in the collective sense, as a community, as a culture, to recognize those times is not only cathartic, but it's protective. It is able to say that this thing has happened. It was a difficult period, and it is something that we will never allow to happen again. But in recognizing and mourning that this thing happened, the struggles that we've shared through slavery, through segregation, through modern struggles of economic depression and oppression. And then finally, the theme of hope and faith. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who has brought us thus far on the way. And this idea that even despite the struggles and the challenges that the second stanza harkens back to, that we as a community maintain our hope and maintain our faith. And I'm a hope junkie. That's one of the things that kind of keeps me going. And I think that in this time as a community and as a nation, as we are struggling, as we are overcoming, as we are trying to find a way through a global pandemic like we haven't seen in over 100 years, that thinking back to this song and these words that were written over 100 years ago is a good reminder that maintaining our hope, maintaining our faith, and maintaining our collective efforts as a community and as a council can bring us to the same type of victory that we hear about in Lift Every Voice and Sing. So I'm so grateful to my council colleagues for allowing us this opportunity to speak on Lift Every Voice and Sing and the Black National Anthem, and especially to Councilwoman Berry for suggesting that we do so. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Council people, Barry and Gould, I am so delighted that you did this. I'm disappointed Justin didn't sing. You said you did it in middle school. So you put it out there. You put it out there. However, I think of Maya Angelou and Still I Rise. It's our collective appreciations of each other's cultures and struggles. And so I take this very much to heart, and I'm delighted this was part of this evening's togetherness. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Beinfeld. Is there anything anybody else would care to add? To Mrs. Berry and Mr. Gould, I appreciate that we took the time this evening to do that. That was meaningful and appropriate, especially this month, but anytime. Thank you. Still wish you would have sung.
Thank you, Mayor. Feel free to move on to the next agenda item now. Thank you.
Ask any of the directors. You can ask Mr. Zach. Singing is part of directors' meetings. At least I try. At least I try. But it's it may happen yet. All right. Very good. Okay, so now we move to the directors' reports, which don't have to be sung either, unless you want to, in which case I have no objection. Starting with finance, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any voice left, so I can't sing anyway. So one of the byproducts of COVID. Just give the council a little update of where we are, revenue and expense wise. A month and a half into the year, we had some little system issues that have been resolved. So I'll get all these reports out tomorrow. But through today, we've taken a little bit over $3 million in for the general fund in terms of revenue. The biggest component of that is both the advance that we received from Cuyahoga County. That totaled about 1.36 million. That goes to the general fund and some other funds as well. And we also have collected in 2 months from Rita $1.8 million in income tax. And again, that's our cash is a month behind the actual collection. So December collections were posted in January. January collections were posted earlier this month. So we're 2 months into the year in terms of income tax collections. In terms of total revenue, year to date, we're at about 3.5 million. So things are coming in rather well at this point. Again, the county advance on property taxes is the biggest component of that. And that is to be leveraged over the first 6 months of the year. We'll get a final settlement of our property taxes, which includes all the special assessments, probably sometime in March. In terms of expenses for the general fund, we're only at $893,952. We had a hold on spending at the beginning of the year while we closed out 2020. So we're getting caught up in that right now. But the expenses in the general fund were $893,000. And I thought I had it. Oh, here it is. The total expense for all funds is $984,000. So as you can see, we spent $984,000. We took in $3.5 million. So we had a pretty good month and a half there. Just an update, and again, I'll get some information out to everyone. Our securities portfolio with Fifth Third, we had a beginning balance of $6.77 million at the beginning of December. That amount now at the end of January, $6.975 million. The $200,000 addition in there, as I informed council, was a payback of when we cashed in some of those securities in 2019 and 2020 to pay some pending expenses. And we will get all those outgoing liabilities satisfied by the end of this month. We just executed another transfer of $75,000 today to the portfolio. So we're hopeful to earn a little higher rate of interest than keeping it in our operating account. So as I said, I'll get summaries of all this information out to everyone tomorrow. If anybody has any specific questions related to those reports of the budget, please get in touch with me. But other than that, that's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Dennis, for all that. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, very good. Then moving along, we come to Director of Law, Mr. McConville.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to provide an update on the litigation that the city filed on February 5th, seeking injunctive relief against the owners of a home on Churchill Boulevard in connection with the proposed use of the home as a synagogue. As council members are probably aware, the city obtained a temporary restraining order that restrained the use of the home as a synagogue. The postscript to the litigation is that the parties have agreed through council to stipulate to an order entering a permanent injunction. The permanent injunction language will track very closely the language of the temporary restraining order, although there will be some differences in particular relating to the outcome of the city's building department inspections, which indicated that there were no building code violations in the home. We've been working with opposing counsel on the language of the draft, or excuse me, the language of the order. It's nearly complete. And I anticipate that the court will journalize the injunction most likely tomorrow, but certainly this week. And that concludes my report.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. McConville. Are there any questions for Mr. McConville? Moving on, Public Safety, Police, Chief Rogers.
Mayor, I have no report at this time.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Public Safety, Fire, Chief Perko.
Thank you, Mayor. As the fire department revisited our community risk reduction efforts going into the new year here, we recognize that we can't let the pandemic slow down our community engagement efforts, especially on education and prevention. So one of the things that we'd like to be bringing up in a future safety committee meeting is the restoration of the CERT team that the department used to run back in the early 2000s. Today we released an informational survey about the CERT team. The CERT team is a community emergency response team. That's a program educating volunteers that would be a part of it about disaster preparedness and hazards that may impact the community here. And through the team, we would get them training in basic disaster response, fire safety, very basic search and rescue and organization to help us mitigate different incidents. So we do have a survey on our social media. It's on the city webpage, and I believe Mr. Cook has also rolled this out to assist us. It's a non-commitment survey. It's just to gain interest in the community, see how many people are interested and what kind of backgrounds they have so that we can put a plan together and discuss it in an upcoming safety committee meeting. So we look forward to getting some information from the community on that.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Chief Perko. Does anybody have any questions for Chief Perko? Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you. Looking forward to the reconstitution of CERT. Next is would-be service. Mr. Picorni is on vacation and has been excused from the meeting, and he has no report. Next then is building, housing, and development. Mr. Zach, do you have a report?
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. I just want to reiterate the statement that was put on our Facebook page this morning about the Building and Housing Department. Due to circumstances beyond anyone's control, the Building and Housing Department will remain closed until Wednesday, February 24th. You may leave a voicemail or an email with the department during the time, and your message will be answered as soon as it is possible. We are closed due to quarantine as a result of contact tracing.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Zach. Any questions for Mr. Zach? All right. Moving on then, City Engineer, Mr. Chuney.
Report this evening, Mayor.
Okay, very good. Thank you, sir. Next then is Communications and Civic Engagement, Mr. Cook.
Good evening, everyone. You know, my 2.5 with the city, I don't think my phone is blown up as much as it did about 15 minutes ago when there was speculation on whether or not Gold was going to sing for us. I was already cutting that. It was going to be on Twitter. It was going to go viral by the morning, but Councilman, the invitation is open, and anytime you want to sing in a meeting, and I know Councilman Blankfield has the pipes as well. Any song, anytime, you know, we'll get it out there for the residents. My report this evening, also speaking of Black History Month, Mosaic comes out next week. We have a couple features on Black History Month, and I think it's well done, and I hope you all like it. Also speaking of media coverage from this meeting, the Heights Observer is looking to do a front page story on the townhomes that you approved earlier today. That's due tomorrow at noon. If any of you want to be quoted in that article, just shoot me an email tonight or first thing in the morning. I'll work to get that in. We'll probably also do something in the March newsletter. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Cook. And yes, anyone who would like to do that, please do contact Mr. Cook with a quote. Okay, moving on to economic development, Mrs. Drucker.
My report will be in executive session, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you. And we turn now to reports from standing committees, building and housing, Mrs. Blankfeld.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I was in touch with our clerk this evening, and she has put out a poll. Hopefully, sometime during the week of the 22nd, we will have another Building and Housing Committee meeting to further review the most recent updates to the rental ordinance. And that's all I have to report this evening.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Blankfeld. Community outreach, Mrs. Pardee.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Economic development, Mr. Rock.
Yes, Mayor, we met this evening at 6 o'clock to discuss the RFP for the new zoning code and the steering committee members that we would appoint to that committee. So I have some calls to make. We're going to try to appoint a member from the Planning Commission, the Architecture Review Board, and the Board of Zoning Appeals, as well as the Economic Committee itself for the steering committee for the RFP. There is going to be an interview of pre-selected applicants through that RFP process. We're targeting March 9th or March 8th as the backup if March 9th doesn't work for the committee members. So I will poll the members that we appoint to make sure that date is available for that. And that's all I got.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Rock. Next then is finance, Mrs. Weiss.
Thank you, Mayor. No report.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Recreation, Mr. Erdl.
No report, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Erdl. Safety, Mrs. Berry.
We are trying to have a safety committee meeting the first week of March. So Kelly has sent out a doodle poll to see if everyone's available or who is available.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Berry. Service and utilities, Mr. Gould.
Thank you, Mayor. We heard our one item, and that's my report. We're going to start this process of creating the survey, which will be sent to each of our households here in University Heights, and we will be back with printing and postage costs at a later meeting.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Gould. Finally, we have Committee of the Whole, Mrs. Weiss.
No report, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have reached the conclusion of the, excuse me, regular portion of the meeting. We are going to go into the executive session that we moved into, or that we moved to do earlier. I do not anticipate any additional business or items added to the agenda following the executive session. We will be uploading this recording to YouTube. If there is additional business, which we don't expect, it will be part of that recording, and you're welcome to view it then. You're also welcome to stay on this side of the executive session if you wish. If you're not here when we come back, be well and be safe, and we'll be back for next City Council meeting the first Monday of March. Kelly, is there a motion to return to?
Also move, Mayor.
We have a motion by Mr. Blankfeld. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Erdl. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry. You're muted.
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, we are back into regular session. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Erdl. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Berry. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. We'll see you all back on March 1st, if not for some reason sooner. Everyone have a good night. Be well and be safe.
Be well, everyone. Good night.
Good night, all.
Bye.
And I'm going to stop the recording.